Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. My name is John Colson. I am a governor of the Shrine of Remembrance. It is my pleasure and my privilege to be your host this morning at this very special occasion in this sacred place, the sanctuary of the Shrine of Remembrance. We will be commemorating this morning the sacrifice, the bravery, and the deeds of a famous battalion, the 2nd 22nd. In some ways, it is a unique battalion in the history of Australia, in that a Salvation Army band enlisted in the battalion as its band and suffered the privations that the soldiers of that battalion suffered. And it is most keeping this morning that we should commence our service with a presentation by the Preston Salvation Army Band. Gentlemen. We here at the Shrine embrace the diversity of our community, and we acknowledge the Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land in which we celebrate the sacrifice and the commitment of Australian servicemen and women. And we pay our respects to their elders, past and present. Your Master of Ceremonies this morning, Mr. Laurie Luxmore. Laurie.
On behalf of the 2nd 22nd Battalion and Lark Force Association, I'd like to welcome everyone here today for this short service in memory of the fallen diggers. Now, I'd just like to hand over now to Jenny Penrose, who's going to tell her story about the 2nd 22nd Battalion. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. It is an honour, and I am humbled to be here today to share our story. Today we remember those men that sacrificed their lives to defend Rabaul from the Japanese invasion on the 23rd of January 1942, 82 years ago. Discovering the stories of our brave men has been an incredible journey. There is an incredible thread that links us all, the 22nd Battalion and Rabaul. My dad's brother, Albert Cooper, is my person, and since knowing about the 2nd 22nd group, I have discovered the more I learn, the more questions I have. I began my journey with our family's truth, that being that Uncle Albert went to war and didn't come back. He was 23. My son is 25. It just breaks my heart. He was a kind and considerate young man, a loving son and a caring brother. He lived and grew up in Clarendon Street, South Melbourne, not far from here. He was a pharmacist and a member of the Albert Park Rowing Club. He loved his rowing and won many, many trophies. Dad didn't talk much about Albert when we were growing up. It wasn't really the done thing. I have, however, been fortunate to have been able to talk to some of the men that have returned from Rabaul. And thank you to Norm Furness and Fred Colmorgan in particular. Their stories have been incredible and provided insightful first-hand experiences. I have learnt that our truth is fluid. A perfect example of this is the incredible discovery of the Montevideo Maru in April of last year. What we once thought was impossible is now possible, and there is so much more to learn. I'm fortunate to have over 40 handwritten letters from my Uncle Albert that detail his training at Rabaul, his journey to Bonagilla, and his time at Rabaul. So today I would like to share what I've learned. The 2nd 22nd Battalion consisted of over 1,400 men, including 23 Salvation Army band members and the Great Arthur Gulledge. And in early July 1940, the men formed part of the 23rd Brigade and the 8th Division. And if we look at the battalion colour patch, the grey oval area represents the 8th Division. The purple triangle pointing upward represents the 2nd 22nd Battalion, and the red triangle pointing down represents the 23rd Brigade. The battalion was initially headquartered at Victoria Barracks in Melbourne, and they travelled by train to Rabaul Army Camp in July of 1940. 1/3 of the battalion came from Central Victoria. In September of 1940, the 2nd 22nd and the 2nd 21st troops were instructed to move from Rabaul to Bonagilla near Wodonga for more training. This became the longest military march in Australian Defence Force history. The men marched 235 kilometres and arrived at Bonagilla on the 4th of October. Albert wrote that the people in the towns that they passed through were very patriotic. It was like a public holiday. Schools were closed and the streets were lined with people as the whole town came out to welcome the brave Aussie lads. The troops were welcomed with cases of oranges and fruit, as well as cigarettes and PK chewing gum. Our troops believed they were bound for the Middle East. However, the Japanese had entered the war and it was imperative to protect the northeast coast of Australia. So in early 1941, the troops were sent to the Australian-mandated territory island of New Britain to protect the harbour paradise called Rabaul. The 2nd 22nd combined of the local unit of the New Guinea Volunteer Rifles, a coastal defence battery, an anti-aircraft battery, elements of the 2nd 10th Field Ambulance and the 17th Anti-Tank Battery, and they formed Lark Force. This force would also later be supported by the 24th Squadron RAAF. Their role was to protect the airfields and the seaplane base at Rabaul, as this provided early warning of the Japanese movements through the islands and Australia's north. The Australian government had foreseen months earlier that the Japanese attack was imminent and would be beyond the capacity of this small garrison. Unfortunately, the garrison was neither reinforced nor ordered to withdraw. The local women and children began evacuating just before Christmas of 1941 and again during mid-January 1942. Sadly, the evacuation did not include boys over the age of 14 years of age, nor their fathers. The capture of New Britain was of strategic importance to Japan as it offered a deep water harbour and airfields to provide protection. Early aerial reconnaissance of the town identified the positioning of our defending troops. It was imperative for the Japanese to take out our air assets first, as this would interfere with their landing invasion. And this is what they did. Norm told us that he would sometimes see well-dressed Japanese tourists in town taking photos. He said this was very suspicious because the male tourists had very shiny, polished shoes. In one of Albert's letters, he writes on the 30th of December, "We had a Jap plane fly overhead on Christmas Day, but it was too high for our guns to have shot at him. He had a wingspan 17 feet bigger than the American Flying Fortress. It was a Jap Navy plane and only came over to take photographs. His tactics was to dive out of the clouds with his engine shut off, take his photos, then climb up to the clouds again." On the 7th of January, he wrote, "We received a visit from the Japs on Sunday at 11 a.m. in the morning, and we didn't know if it was the Japs or the Yanks until we saw the bombs coming down. We opened fire on them, but didn't do much damage because they were flying too high. They kept circling us for more than 4 hours and dropped bombs every few hours, but their target was terrible and they kept missing everybody. Except sadly, there were some natives that were killed and 24 natives were injured." There was no damage done with the bombs, so it was obvious they were just doing target practice. Yesterday was Tuesday and they came over just before dark, dropped their loads, and there wasn't much lower, the planes weren't much lower, but their aiming was just as bad. We had another visit on Wednesday at 11 o'clock this time. Their aim was a little bit better, but they still didn't hit anything of worthy. Then, on the 22nd of January, 1942, Rabaul was attacked by over 75 planes, Japanese planes. The 23rd of January, in the early hours, enemy troops began to land on Blanche Bay. And at daylight, enemy planes appeared and dive-bombed and machine-gunned A, C and D companies. Norm said he watched 20 to 25 Japanese ships, including aircraft carriers, enter the harbour, each likely to be carrying nearly 1,000 troops. Our boys were overwhelmed to 20 to 1. Norm said he watched 5 of our 6 Wirraway planes get shot down during the initial attack. The 2nd 22nd made a significant dent in the Japanese invasion, something the attackers were not ready for. However, it was not long until the troops realised that they were well and truly outnumbered. Ammunition was low and the guns were in poor condition. Lark Force was overrun. The command was given by Lieutenant Colonel John Scanlon. It was now every man for himself. Dense jungle, high mountain ranges and the sea and the Japanese forces surrounded the troops. All communications had broken down. Those that survived the initial conflict had to make the decision to surrender or try to escape. Norm told us that the Aussies blew up their own stores of ammunition just so the Japanese could not get access to it. Although the 2nd 22nd had been on the island for some time, Norm also told us that they didn't actually know the layout of the island. They didn't know what was over the next mountain, and they did not have any contingency plans in the event of attack. There was no backup ammunition, there was no backup of supplies, of food or medicines. Approximately 160 Australians were captured by the Japanese while trying to escape and were massacred at Tol and Withdrew plantations and Gasmata. But incredibly, 6 of these men survived the butchering at Tol. Civilians and local families were also caught up in the invasion and also paid the ultimate price. Those troops that had escaped the jungle broke into smaller groups. The men ranged from company size to pairs and individuals. Some found small boats and some got away under their own steam. Others were picked up by larger vessels. Over the coming months, between 350 and 400 members of Lark Force returned to Australia. On the 22nd of June 1942, 1,053 prisoners, including 208 civilians, were boarded aboard the Montevideo Maru, bound for Hainan Island. 9 days later, on the 1st of July 1942, the Montevideo Maru was spotted by an American submarine, the USS Sturgeon. The Montevideo Maru was not marked as carrying POW, and after hours of strategic manoeuvring, 4 torpedoes were launched. Unaware that Allied troops were on board, Impact was at 2:29 a.m. in the morning, and it took 10 minutes from being hit until the devastating conclusion. All prisoners on board died. Twice as many lives were lost in one morning compared to the entire Vietnam War. Australia's worst maritime disaster. And to make matters worse, it took the Australian government of the day more than 3 years to advise families that their loved ones were not coming home. Today we acknowledge members of the 22nd Battalion and all those affected by the attack of the Rabaul on the 23rd of January 1942. We have a responsibility to ensure that our boys did not die in vain. We have a responsibility to tell their stories and share their truth in the hope that this never happens again. We will remember them, lest we forget.
Line guard, take post. Our Salvation Army Band will perform the Royal Hymn. Please be seated. Laurie, would you lay the wreath on behalf of the association?
I will. Thank you, Colonel.
Are there other people who would like to lay wreaths on this occasion? Please come forward, no ceremony. Please, those who have poppies, would you wait till the end of the ceremony, please? Thank you. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you all, if you can, to be upstanding. To my younger guests this morning, the ode is a sacred poem which is recited on such occasions, the final words of which are, "We will remember them." And I encourage everybody here present this morning to repeat those words with me when I recite the ode. That will be followed by bugle calls, the last post, and the national anthem. And I ask you to remain standing during this part of our service. I will break the silence with the words, "Lest we forget." Again, I encourage you all present to repeat those words with me on that occasion. The Ode. They shall grow not old, as we who are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them. Thank you. Lest we forget. Please remain standing for the national anthem. Shrine Guard, fall out. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who have a poppy and would like to, the urns on either side of the stone of remembrance there, please place your poppies there now. No ceremony, just come forward at your own time. Thank you. And then any closing remarks from you, Laurie?
Yeah.
Up to you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You're all welcome to join us upstairs in the Western Gallery for a afternoon tea and a little bit of a chat together as we remember the diggers from Rabaul. Thank you again. Thank you.